advertising is in the spotlight. That is FNB, a globally recognized brand with strong links to innovation. But it heads with the ANC over a controversial new ad campaign. Now with pop culture classics including the Castrol can of the best and the populist Nandos ads, we're taking a look at the risks and opportunities associated with trying to turn your brand into a popular culture icon. Joining us to unpack this, a FNB journalist, Jessica Hubbard. We've got Tony Kunderman, a advertising commentator, joining us, and Mark Shefferman, marketing specialist and digital strategist at Base 2. Thanks so much for joining us. So I'll start off with you, Tony. I mean, what was your response to the FNB You Can Help ad? Do you think that they did the right thing?
Well, on the face of it, it seems like a harmless enough idea. They did the survey of children's attitudes, and they indicated their support of children and their views, and why not? The ANC's response seems to say more about the ANC than it does about the bank or the ad. They're obviously sensitive, and if there's any criticism to be made of the bank, it's probably that they were insufficiently aware, maybe a bit naively unaware about what a sensitive subject this was at this particular time, with the election looming in the future and so on.
So, I mean, they used words in the ad like greed, mistrust, anger, and they referred to the difficulties of before us. They also talked about petty politics. Do you think, what did you think of their choice of words specifically in the ad? And of course, that's, I'm assuming, what the ANC is responding to, Mark.
I think, yeah, definitely. I think the ANC's responded to that, but I think also what happened was the way the actual shots were produced. So even the live broadcast, I remember actually looking outside to check the weather, whether it was actually happening live, because the execution came across as almost done in studio. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the same kind of context for the interviews with the children. It almost came across as being too professional and not the words of the children, where it didn't seem so real. So I think it's almost been taken from the ANC's perspective that these scripts have been written by FNB as a challenge to the government. But I think what they did do really well, if you think about the philosophy behind FNB and creating an extension of their brand, so taking how can we help you and extending it to the consumers to say you can help as well, was quite a great concept behind this.
Do you think it makes sense, though, for a brand that is wanting to build a popular culture and is wanting to be seen in the light that FNB has been seen in, to be making social commentary?
I think the brands, you have to tread really carefully, and you have to be sure that what the message you're getting out there is in line with your general branding, because FNB, they positioning themselves as leaders in technology and funky and young and innovative, and this is a bit, I was quite surprised. They're sort of going in a different direction, and that can confuse people. So I think your messaging needs to be consistent, and I think you need to tread really carefully when you go into politics and into that kind of commentary, and they may just have done it at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's also another issue.
I mean, I genuinely think the time has probably been, it's just a time when the ANC is incredibly sensitive on the issue, and I think that it's becoming, you can pretty much pick a headline at the moment and somebody feels that the ANC has been offended in some way, shape or form. And I think it could also be that it is also becoming populist culture simply to bash the ruling party at the moment. But I mean, I think exactly to Jess's point though was, it's, you know, you've got to make sure you stay on brand. You've got to be able to represent what you're trying to do with your thing. Innovation, we've seen FNB really go the full tilt with innovation. The Steve campaign, when they were winning new clients, you understood what they were doing. This maybe takes a little one step aside, and you wonder, you know, are we diluting a brand that we really needed? We had a winning formula. And
I mean, did they have a winning formula? That's the next question. I mean, how long could the Steve Beep Bank ads go on for, Tony?
Well, it seemed like he'd come to the end of his life. They sort of phased him out, and although they hadn't said that he was finished, they were kind of reassessing where he belonged in the campaign. And I think no matter what else was about to happen, I don't think they would have kept him going again. They wouldn't have brought him back, in other words. He'd done his bit. He'd served his time, and it was time to move on.
How would you contrast this to Nandos and the commentary that they've also made, and some would see it as attacks on the government and politicians as well?
I think from going back to the brand and what the brand stands for, so often you get a brief that we want to do advertising like Nandos and we want to do things like Apple. But the reality is it has to be right for your brand. So for Nandos, they've built their entire advertising model around that, and that's why it works so well. Even when they see those videos, they do it so tactically that they'll launch it over a weekend, it gets pulled off. And if you go to YouTube, you'll see that the views aren't high on their own channel. It's other guys that they've seeded it through. So I think going back to them, their advertising is smart, and everyone's almost created a perception of they expect it from Nandos. So if an FNB or another brand tries to do the same thing, and I think if you go to like 10 and 5, you'll see every brand's try to jump onto this FNB bandwagon at the moment, but you either, if you're going to do it really well, and I think Nandos has built the entire model around that, and they do it exceptionally well. So I think Nandos is a brand that can actually get away with something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were chatting a little bit about the Apple versus Samsung thing. I think just taking one step away, like Apple was able to build its brand, and everybody went from being a sort of an outlying tech brand that was on the outside and nobody really knew it, but it was sort of for the real Uber
Tech
geeks.
savvy. Yeah.
And then suddenly it became mainstream. I mean, everybody has an Apple. I mean, you can look around the table. It's Apple, Apple, Apple. And now suddenly you've got to try and say, well, now I'm saying Samsung. How do I tackle that market share? And what's my competitive brand advantage that Apple doesn't have? And I think, I mean, we were chatting a little bit off air. There's an opportunity there if you can find whatever it is that differentiates your brand and then hammer home that message that this is what we do well.
Do you always have to go for the cool factor, though? I mean,
I think it depends on who you are. Again, FNB, they're a bank, so they have to be careful because people are already, a little bit suspicious naturally. And so going into politics just could be the wrong thing. They need to stay in something perhaps a little more light-hearted than going into something so heavy and something that people are perhaps a little tired of, and it's saturated now. So you also risk being, you come across as inauthentic. You don't have any clout if you're going into something that you haven't been in previously. So when Nandos does their political commentary with satire, people believe it and they take it as genuine because that's what they've been doing for so long. But FNB suddenly going into this new area where there perhaps is not really a good fit with the brand, it doesn't come across well, and I think it could harm them in the long run.
Yes, the point also about that is that Nandos is not considered terribly important or serious. So you can dismiss what they say as well, inconsequential, they're just a bunch of hamburger eaters. But a bank counts for something. It's what handles our money and should be a serious operation. Therefore,
they were trying to make a serious point, though.
No, so they weren't.
They were trying to make a serious point, though.
Yeah, oh yes, no, I agree. But what I mean is the reaction from the government would be to ignore Nandos because it doesn't matter very much, but to be very upset by First National Bank because it is a powerful institution.
I think just going back to what you were saying about the Steve campaign and sales and a model that worked, just based on the entire core of this campaign and the underlying message of we trying to make a difference and hear the voices of the children, I think my only concern was that even on the landing page of that actual site, you've still got to switch to FNB banner. So if this had nothing to do with acquisitions or sales, surely that wouldn't have been in there. So it's still part of an entire perception job that they're doing from a marketing point of view, that when someone gets to that point of I want to switch banks because I've had enough, where they're going to go. So obviously Steve was a campaign that everyone hated, but it was top of mind all the time. And in terms of their calendar, Steve worked perfectly according to their marketing messaging. So you could see when the next campaign was launched and what product they were trying to push at that stage. So just based on this campaign, I just hope that it's not a campaign that got underlying sales things to it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of the things that I find very interesting, obviously technology has really changed the way that you market a brand. It's not traditional ROP advertising and very staid type of brand building and reinforcement. Now you can do a YouTube clip over the weekend and it runs through. You've got access to huge markets using social media. I mean, maybe just some insight into what, when clients come to you, are they using the digital channels and saying this is how I want to go and build my brand?
Sure. There's a book called The Thank You Economy by Gary Vaynerchuk, and there's just
The Thank You Economy.
The Thank You Economy, yes. And there's a quote that he talks about that when you're doing a campaign, and if you're doing just traditional TV, you're using a microphone to shout and just get your message out there. But what needs to happen is you need to create a campaign that evokes emotion within the consumers and actually gets them to appeal to want to engage with you further. And just having like your Twitter or Facebook logo on a TV ad or print ad, that's not sufficient. That's as good as saying we've got a direct store, we've got a telephone number you can phone. So I think what they achieved really well is utilizing the entire what they call interactive brand ecosystem. So they first seeded it on social media early in January, where you could then go through to the site and put your cell phone number as a reminder, which I thought was very innovative as well. And then using social media to gain traction, get the community involved. So I think from a digital perspective, it's not digital's the future at all. That's not the case. It's all about integration and understanding strategically how those channels need to work together to effectively get your brand message out there.
But how important is having leadership? I mean, I've done quite a lot of reading about the subject of sort of brand building, and the one that comes through all the time is leadership and something that represents your brand, a person, an icon essentially that represents your brand. I mean, you know, if you're an agency and somebody comes to you and says, I want to run an advert that really is going to rock the ANC to its core, how do you do it without leadership? You need some kind of icon around which to play.
I think it's absolutely critical. I mean, leadership more from internally within the company, because going back to Apple as an example, so Simon Sinek created a concept called the golden circle, and it's about understanding what your why is of your brand. So if you look at Steve Jobs, his why was to challenge the status quo and keep everything insanely simple. And now I wonder if he had to come back to life and look where Apple is today, and look at the iPhone 5 not having NFC technology, looking at Apple bringing out an iPad mini. These are all things that almost don't challenge the status quo, but almost converting back to what is Samsung doing, how can we challenge them? So
are they going off brand?
100%.
Yeah, so is that something that you would say is critical, having that kind of strategic oversight and that leader to understand or guide brand direction?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but there was a saying by a well-known marketing man years ago called Larry Light, and he said, and he was talking about your position in the marketplace, your brand's position in the marketplace. 1 is wonderful, 2 is terrific, 3 is threatened, and 4 is fatal. And I'm not quite sure whether this is what you were getting with this particular query, but the importance of being at the top was very great in marketing world, and you see it in all sorts of categories. If you're anything below 3, you're in trouble.